Welcome back, Canisius High School community. It is Andy Deyell, your Vice President for Institutional Advancement, back with yet another episode of Conversations with Canisius, our regular Zoom series where we check in with our alums all over the United States and catch up with them about what they're up to these days and check in back in on their time at Canisius High School and what they've been up to since that time at 1180 Delaware. I am joined today all the way from Bradenton, Florida, sunny Bradenton, Florida, I hope. By Robert Inderbitzen. Is it sunny there? Because I know it's not here.
Yeah, it is sunny.
Robert Inderbitzen from the class of 1964 is joining us today. Robert, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for that. Well, I guess that's not your intro. Thanks for some kind words anyway. It's beautiful down here.
That's great. That's great. Robert is a retired founder of the company REI Safety Services, and he has enjoyed a 30-year career in what began at Union Carbide, but then morphed into Praxair. And we're going to get into a little bit of that and why your nickname at work was Mr. Safety. But first, let's go back. Your class of 64, which means you started at Canisius in 1960. Tell us a little bit about how you found out about Canisius High School and some of your influences there while you were at the school.
Thanks for that, Andy. You got to realize, that was a long time ago, and for a guy who can't even remember what he had for breakfast this morning, it's pretty hard to remember that far back. But and I also want people to know that for us, Zoom was what an airplane did. We didn't have any clue what a Zoom was. But I have been on a few Zooms before this, so I think I can. But thanks for that. Yeah, it is interesting because my father went to Bennett High School and played football until he wrecked his knee. But then he went to Canisius College. So I guess from the time my parents were talking about Canisius and Jesuits, it was sort of planted in my mind that I was going to go to Canisius if we could financially afford to do that. So that's what really, I guess, I never thought about going anyplace else other than Canisius.
Well, and when you arrived here at 1180 Delaware, who were some of those transformative adults who, have stuck with you all these years later?
Yeah, my homeroom teacher, and I don't even know if they do homeroom anymore, but that was Mr. Kessler. And he was not only a great instructor, but a great mentor too. And then sophomore, junior, and senior year, I ran cross country. It's interesting because in the yearbook, I'm not in any of the cross country pictures, and either they left me out on purpose or I probably didn't get the word and missed that day. But I was never very good at it. But the coach there was Mr. Robert Murray, and he was really a good coach. And he probably shaped the perseverance. As I was never very good, I always finished somehow, displacing people from the other team. If you run cross country, people know what that means. Mm-hmm. But I never finished in the top 5. But it was the perseverance, when you run that track around the lake 2 times, the second time around is hard to get up that last hill. And I think cross country just taught me to keep going no matter how much it hurt. But I think the real turnaround for me at Canisius was in my sophomore year. Mr. Dockery took me aside, and you got to understand, I wasn't a bad kid, but I was having a good time. Mm-hmm. Classes were sort of secondary to what I was doing. And he took me aside, and I remember his exact words. He said, "You are headed down a slippery slope, and if you don't change what you're doing, you're not going to finish here." So that, for when a Jesuit takes you aside and gives you that kind of a conversation, it's different than than kneeling out there holding on to your books. Father Sturm would have you being punished for something. This was sort of a turnaround for me, and between that and I think the retreat we had in sophomore year sort of turned my life around. And I said, well, I better buckle down and try and get some better grades and get out of here before I have a real problem. And so those were probably the people that shaped me the most.
Sure. And you mentioned Nick Kessler early on, and Mr. Kessler is one of the early historians of Canisius High School, wrote a history of the school that, lives on today and was the complement to Paul Cumbo from the class of 97 wrote the sort of the second half of the history of Canisius High School. So Mr. Kessler was remembered fondly by a lot of alums and iconic figure in the history of Canisius High School. So
Yeah,
after,
I don't remember everybody. I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
I don't remember everybody that taught me, but I sure remember him.
Yeah, fair enough. And after Canisius High School, tell us a little bit about your college experience. And I know you have a military background as well. And tell us a little bit about sort of your post Canisius High School education and career.
Yeah, I guess what I got most out of Canisius High School was the discipline that I got out of not only cross country, but just the discipline in general.
Sure.
To get my life on track. But I was also, and I kind of left this out, I was involved in the Glee Club. That was probably my passion. So, we talk about, you need to be passionate about something. I think singing has always been my passion, and I still sing.
Okay.
But coming out of there, the discipline, I think, helped me apply myself at Canisius College. Canisius College, again, was a no-brainer. I wanted to go into engineering. I was in the Greek honors program because I left the choice up to the school, and they had plenty of people in science honors and not enough in Greek honors, so I ended up in Greek honors. But the languages, the Latin, Greek, and the German that I had really helped me. It makes it easy to learn a language, and other languages that I've had to learn along the way, and I'm trying to learn now some Italian because we want to go to Italy. That background really helped a lot. But the discipline that I had coming out of Canisius High School, I think, helped me at Canisius College. And I say it was a no-brainer because I had a New York Regents scholarship, and I had a Canisius scholarship. And between the two of those, that covered all of my costs at Canisius.
Wow.
At Canisius College. Now, I shouldn't probably tell people this, but the tuition at Canisius College was $900 when I started, and it was $1,300 by the time I finished.
Yeah.
I lost one of my scholarships one semester, and I had to pay that $300 out of my own pocket because my parents couldn't do it. But that taught me a lesson that you don't ever want to lose one of those scholarships. But in the pre-engineering program at Canisius, and I'd always wanted to be in the military, but in pre-engineering, you had to go to the University of Detroit in a co-op program. I don't know if they're still doing that, but it was 2 years at Canisius College, and then you went to Detroit. Well, I would have lost both scholarships going to Detroit, and it was a co-op where you went to school a semester and then you worked a semester, but the work semesters were going to be away from home, so the money that I made would go towards room and board, and it got to the point where I just couldn't afford to do that. So, and the kicker was I was having trouble. I never had trouble with math, but I was having trouble with calculus. Differential equations tore me up. And I was doing really well in English, philosophy, theology. So I switched into an English program after that 2 years of engineering. But I'll bring that up a little bit later because it did help me get the job that I ended up getting. But while I was at Canisius College, still stayed with the Glee Club, doing a lot of singing there. It was a great way to meet girls. So that was the other reason for being in the Glee Club. And actually met my wife while we were still in Canisius High School. We did a play over at Mount St. Joseph's, I'm sorry. Mount St. Joseph's Academy was right across the street from Canisius College. But at the time I went into that play, it was because they took Glee Club people and we went around to the different girls' schools. Met my wife as a senior in high school. We dated all through college and then got married after we graduated. And she went to Buff State. I went to Canisius, but we just clicked. We're still married, so that's 54 years, I think, something like that. Anyway, so I ended up in an English program, still with the Glee Club, but ROTC was at that time. Then that became my passion. Did really well in ROTC. Got out, went into the military. Did 6 years at that point, and a lot of leadership positions, and some leadership in college too. Not so much in high school, but I was a second in command, I guess, in the Glee Club, and I was a second in command in ROTC by my senior year. So a lot of leadership stuff, which again shaped my background and ultimately helped me get a job. So went to El Paso. I was in air defense artillery in the Army. Went to El Paso to start out with, 2 years in Germany. And this was during Vietnam. I was in Hawk missiles. They just pulled the Hawks out of Vietnam, but they still had them in Korea. So after Germany, they sent me to Korea. At that point, we had 2 children, came back to El Paso, had our 3rd child there. And then I was in a program where I owed the military a couple of years of additional service because of the training that they put me through. I won't go into that program, but it came crashing down around the military, and eventually that program went away. So I was supposed to go up to North Dakota, but it was kind of falling apart at the time. So I opted out. And after this was post-Vietnam, 1974. They were looking for excuses to let people out. They had more people than they needed. So I resigned my commission. I was a captain at the time, and got out. But then to get the job with initially Union Carbide in the Linde Gases division, they were looking for somebody in a training department. So I had an English degree with a minor in engineering. They normally hire chemical engineers. So English degree, minor in engineering, needed somebody who could read and write and translate complex chemical information into stuff that hourly employees could understand, or all employees could understand. So that got me in the door. And really, your background in school that's about all it's going to do for you. It's going to get you in the door, and then what you do from then on really is just how well you perform in different positions. Started in training, ended up doing some operations, some production, some distribution. All through that, though, the Linde division of Union Carbide had a really strong safety background and program. They followed the DuPont safety philosophy. So all of my background really helped me get into that. And then that just continued to build on that, that safety. When I retired from Praxair, I ended up as a safety director for an association out of Washington, D.C. And again, it was that safety background that helped me get that job. And I did that after retirement, really, for another 4 or 5 years. Then did my own consulting for a number of years. Never did a lot of it, but it helped a little bit here and there. And then finally completely retired a couple of years ago. But they still call me Mr. Safety. Even my kids call me Mr. Safety.
There's worse things to be called, right?
Yeah.
And as you look back on, 30 years of a professional career, your time in the military, your time in college, what were some of those lessons from Canisius High School that you took with you, through your academic and professional careers? You mentioned some of a little bit early, a little bit earlier on, but just take us through some of those things that stuck with you from Canisius High School.
Yeah, I think one was you just need to soak up all the knowledge and experience that you can. I was typically working 2, sometimes 3 jobs while I was going to school to supplement my income, and I continued to do that. I think when I started at Canisius High School, I was still delivering newspapers, but I worked actually to work off some of my tuition. I worked in the sports office, answering telephones that never rang. But they put me in there, and that took off so many dollars off of my tuition. But yeah, to get the knowledge and experience that you need, and then I guess seeking out leadership roles also. Obviously, by the time I got into the military, they were looking for leaders. So the background that I had in the few positions that I held that were considered leadership or at least semi-leadership roles. And it didn't make any difference whether you were the assistant president of the Glee Club or a leader in some other way. It all added up towards the leadership skills. And I guess the other thing is, and again, for me, it was singing. Find something that you're passionate about,
Yeah,
and just try and do it really well. I mean, I could have been passionate about cross country, but that was just awful for me. I mean, I did cross country for the discipline. I was never good at it, but find something that you're good at, that you're passionate about, and don't let it die off or drop off just because somebody tells you, you need to be in something else.
That's great. And we've talked a lot about actually just looking back and your history in the past and stuff like that. What about the future? I know you're retired, you were in Tennessee for a little while. Now you're down in Florida. What does Robert Inderbitzen have, planned for the future, you and Dory?
Well, let me back up just a second and give you one other piece.
Oh, please.
At some point, at some point when I got out of the military, I had VA veterans benefits to be able to get an advanced degree. So through an off-campus program at McGuire Air Force Base, and we were living in New Jersey at the time, I was able to get an MBA from Southern Illinois University. And it was a weekend program, so you could go to work during the week and still do the MBA program. But the comment I'd make there for students who are considering advanced degrees is that was so much more beneficial to me and effective for me because I had some work experience. By the time I did that, I'd been out of school for about 10 years. Sure. And I had to do it before my 10 years out of the military was up. So this is like 1984, just before 84. And it took me 2 years to complete. But the experience and the work experience and the background that I had just made that educational piece much more effective. I mean, I actually found it easy. It's the first time I ever found school easy.
Right.
But it was easy because you could apply what you'd learned over the previous 10 years. It wasn't just going from academics to academics.
Sure.
Now, some people do that and they do it effectively. But for me, it was more effective to get some work experience and then go back to school.
I think that's a really interesting point. I really think, I got my first graduate degree 5 years after my undergrad, and I had worked for 5 years. And I think you're right. I think having some wisdom and experience behind you amplifies that formal education piece of that advanced degree. And that's good advice. I think a lot of people sometimes, stack them together, the undergrad, the grad, the PhD, and then they come out and they're ready to work. But maybe it's something to consider is having a little work experience first. It can help focus you on what you want to study as well.
Oh, sure. And financially, it made so much more sense because what happened was the VA paid me really a cost of living stipend. The company that I was working for changed their rules while I was in the program, and they paid 75% of the tuition. And once I got the degree, they paid the other 25%. So I was actually making money going to get my MBA than if I had done it and had to pay for it myself right out of school. There's a lot of companies, I think, that help, their employees get advanced degrees if it fits, if it fits what they're looking for. And of course, then and I have to tell you, it's funny. As bad as calculus and differential equations tore me up when I was in school, it really made statistics easy because I had to take statistics for my MBA.
Sure.
And everybody in that class was struggling with statistics, and I'm going, I don't understand why we'd struggle with that. And it was just that math background. Even though I didn't perform it very well, the math background made a big difference in learning the statistics.
I find your.
But anyway.
I was going to say, I find your combination of sort of experiences fascinating. You have that English background, the engineering background, and then the military background. And I can't help but think that that's why you were so successful in your leadership role at Prax Air in the Lindy division there is, you could communicate, you had the technical background, and you had some good leadership background. And when you put all those together, it just seems like the perfect storm.
Yeah, and what I forgot to mention is the guy that hired me at Union Carbide was a former naval officer, and he had run an oxygen plant on an aircraft carrier. So that was his background before he got into industrial gases.
Yeah.
Because they had to provide oxygen for the pilots.
Yeah.
And so what they did is they made their own oxygen on an aircraft carrier. But so he was looking for somebody, like I said, that that could read and write,
Mhm.
in the English degree, that had enough technical background to be able to interpret, technical information into something that people could understand. And then he liked the military background too. That was the one that I think put me over the top. He liked the fact that I had been a leader in the military, and those three pieces kind of all fit together, and that's what got me in the door. And then, of course, then, like I say, then it's what you do from then on that
You doing, Brad?
keeps you there.
But a great example and a good path for young people to emulate and follow. And so let's go back now to the future. Let's go back to the future and
Sure.
see. Tell me a little bit about what you guys are planning as you look forward to the rest of your retirement.
Well, family becomes more and more important the older we get. Our kids don't have to take care of us yet, but we've got the three children. They're all very successful, doing well. Our granddaughters are either just graduated from college or getting ready to graduate the next couple of years from college. And then we got one little guy who is our future, because he's the only male grandson in the family. But so we like to spend time with our children, grandchildren, and maybe in the next couple of years, great grandchildren, if that happens. We like to travel. COVID kind of shut that down for a while,
Sure.
but we do have an Italy trip coming up. And my bucket list is being partly satisfied. This weekend, we're going down to Key West. We've never been to Key West. And going back to my college days, I was always a Hemingway fan.
Mhm.
So we're looking forward to going down and seeing his house and
Sure.
spending some time in Key West. But just, travel. I play a little golf. We're sort of in a resort community down here. So, between the pools and golf, I do a little fishing, but I've kind of fallen away from that because we lived on a lake when we were in Tennessee, and I did a lot of fishing there. So I want to get back into some fishing. We still sing. We sing in the church choir. I was even singing in the Gregorian group, which I hadn't sung Gregorian since Canisius probably, but play the guitar, and I started doing that when I was at Canisius High School.
Wow.
And I don't do a lot of that anymore, but I can still do a little bit of that. And I'm also a Jimmy Buffett fan, so that's the other reason for going to Key West.
Good.
So,
Nice. Well,
it's really, I shouldn't say we're winding down. We're busier now than we were when I was working. And it's just because there's so much going on now.
I was about to say, you sound as busy as you've ever been, and
Yep.
just busy in a different way. And I think I think you've earned it. I think you've earned through a long career, you've earned this wonderful retirement, and you're not going to sit on your behind and let it pass you by. You guys are out there doing things, and I think it's great. I really admire it. Well, thank you for spending some time with us today and telling us a little bit about your story and your history. I really enjoyed hearing about it, and I know our alumni community will enjoy it as well. Stay in touch, and we hope to see you back in Buffalo at some point in the future.
Thanks, Andy. And if anybody who watches this has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them whenever I can.
Great. Thanks so much, Robert. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks again.
Bye.
See you, Andy.